Welcome back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame here in Canton, Ohio. We are coming to you today for another installment of our great program, Before the Snap. And if this is your first time tuning in, let me just give you a little background on what Before the Snap is. Before the Snap is a program geared around careers in and around the NFL. We want to showcase to high school students, college students, young professionals, all the different types of careers out there involved in sports. Literally hundreds to thousands of different careers you can have within the field of sports. And today we're focusing on careers in and around the NFL, specifically today, the world of community relations. And we'll dive into that here in a little bit. But for those of you who haven't watched the program, just a little bit of background on it. And for those of you who have tuned in before, thank you so much. You guys are in store for another excellent program. My name is Jake Ray. I'm the Youth and Education Manager here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, where it's our mission to honor the heroes of the game, to preserve its history, to promote its values, and to celebrate excellence together. Those values we promote, those of commitment, integrity, courage, respect, excellence. All of those values not only make our Hall of Famers great football players and get them that bronze bust and that gold jacket here in Canton, Ohio, but it makes them good people as well. It makes them great mentors, coaches, parents, brothers, whatever it might be. And these same values can truly make you the best employee, the best student that you can be. So these values aren't just to make you a great football player, great athlete. These values can truly help you in anything that you do. And you'll be surprised how many times you hear them come up throughout the program today. Before we do get started and introduce our featured guest this week, I do want to pass out some few thank yous. First of all, Blayre Holmes-Davis. Blayre, thank you so much for being a part of the program today. I'll say it a few times, the game of football isn't just a 18-week now job. It's truly every day of the year, pretty much, as we were talking before we came live here today. Every day of the year, 365 days throughout that year, there's something you're working towards to help the organization. So thank you so much for everything you do for the game of football, and truly everything you do for us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Even if you don't know it, there's definitely an impact that you have on us here at the Hall of Fame for sure. Secondly, I'd like to thank our teachers, administrators, educators, professors, anybody that either shared this program with their students today or have their students tuned in live. Thank you for allowing us to just be a small part of your students' learning experience this year. And lastly, as always, we got to thank the students. As we say every week, this program is for you. It isn't for me. It isn't for Nathan. These programs are put in place so you can get your networking started and you can learn a little bit about careers in and around the NFL. So like I say, nobody wants to hear from me asking questions. Nobody wants to hear Nathan ask questions. We want to hear what your students, what you have to say. So as always, students, put your name, your school, and your question in the comment section, that live Q&A, live chat on the YouTube stream right now. And let us know, one, where you're watching from, and two, let us know that question that you have for Blayre today. We want to hear all the great questions, and we've had some really awesome questions here the past few weeks. So we want to keep that ball rolling. And as I said last week, be the first. We want you to be the first person to ask that question. Once that first person does, a lot of people seem to ask more and more questions. So challenge you today, be the first to ask that question. And like every week, we'll try our best to get as many of these questions in the program as we can. So today we are lucky and grateful to be joined by Blayre Holmes-Davis, who is the Director of Community Relations for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In her role, she's in charge of spearheading the organization's community engagement initiative, social justice programs, and working collaboratively with each of the players on their own community engagements and charitable giving efforts. Prior to joining the Steelers, she was the Director of Advocacy and Community Outreach at Adagio. Did I get that right? Adagio Health? Adagio Health. In her role, she was in charge of developing and implementing the organization's advocacy platform and working collaboratively with a variety of community stakeholders to create healthcare and education partnerships throughout Western PA. Prior to that organization, she served as the program manager at the Women and Girls Foundation, training over 200 high school girls to be the next generation of civic leaders through teaching politics, government, youth organizing, leadership development, and community engagement. Blayre graduated from California University of Pennsylvania, not out there in the warm, back in the Midwest in Pennsylvania, in 2012 with a degree in communication. So as you can hear just from that, a lot of community involvement, a lot of giving back to her community. So we are grateful and happy to be joined by Blayre Holmes-Davis today. Blayre, welcome to Before the Snap.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Thank you, Nathan, for having me. And a huge thank you to the entire team at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So excited to be here. I'm excited to share just my work and my experience with the students, and just really looking forward to the conversation this afternoon.
Awesome. And I know we are too. Hopefully all the students tuning in. We got some students already letting us know where they're watching from. So that's great. Let's get those questions coming in. But we're excited to see how the program goes today as well. And like every program, we want to kind of start out and just kind of give that 10,000-foot view, or if you want to dive further in. So what your job is with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You hear community engagement, community programming, community relations, and it can kind of be a broad scope of things that you do on a day-to-day basis. So serving as the director of that department with the Steelers, what does your day-to-day look like working within the field of sport?
Yeah, so I will say, my job varies from a variety of different things throughout the season. The way I like to see it is my job is I'm a bridge builder between the community and our organization and with our players. So, during the football season, it's a really, really hectic time for all of us. And so my job is to make sure that our players, however they want to get active in the community, that I'm making sure that they have the right organization to connect to. So that might be the Boys and Girls Club. It might be a women's center and shelter. This week, I'm sure a lot of you seen, it's My Cause, My Cleats week for the NFL. So really great opportunity for our players to talk about their causes and why they care about them and tell also the story behind it. So really helping our players develop, how do they want to give back to the community, but then also what do they want to do off the football field, right? As I said, it's a busy time during football season, but when they're not on the football field, how do they want to give back? So that goes from a variety of different things, as I mentioned. And so I work with them, as I mentioned, collaboratively to make sure that they're delegating their time during the football season to causes that they care about, but then also working with our community partners to learn about just things that they're going through. As we know, our community is still kind of pushing back and pulling through COVID. There's still a lot of organizations and communities out there that need support. And so my job is to make sure that we as an organization, we as the Pittsburgh Steelers are being intentional, and we're just constantly connecting with them about how we can support them. So that might be from a food bank to a lot of just different communities that are just struggling throughout the holiday season, and making sure that we're able to support them. And then, one thing I love is just working with the team here at the Pittsburgh Steelers to just make sure that the work that we're doing, that people just know about it. So I work really closely with our youth football team, as well as our communications and content team, to just find and develop creative ways to let people know a different side of our players off of the field as well. And so kind of, 30-foot view, that's what my world looks like. But day to day, it's a variety of different things from, community meetings that we have, to, as I mentioned, My Cause, My Cleats. So working with the NFL to make sure that they're aware of what our players' causes are, and just making sure that that those organizations are promoted. And also for fans and people who want to get involved, how can they get involved in their different charities and organizations? So that's really, really the work that I do. So as I said, I like to see myself as a bridge builder between the organization and the community, and also working with the players as well.
That's great. And it kind of gives that broad scope of what you handle on that day-to-day basis, but kind of dive into, what happens outside the season. And there's two things,
Yeah.
I want to pull from there. And the first thing, since it's relevant, it's happening right now. You mentioned My Cause, My Cleats. When looking at the NFL, it's still a very relatively new promotion and event and thing that they do throughout all the different clubs. How important is that for not only the organization, but then even looking at the players at an individual level? I'm sure, some of them are just like, hey, I want to support this, but there's some that have truly a special connection to the cause that they're supporting. Do you see that smile or that gleam in their eyes when they get to support that charity that they feel so passionate about? And then how important does that reflect to, your job and the organization as a whole?
Absolutely. Yeah. So they definitely get excited every time this year when it's the My Cause, My Cleats game. Number one, one thing that about players, they love to personalize their own style. And so we have a lot of guys on our team who love to do that. So the ability to be able to work with a designer to design a cleat, but then also to say, this is a charity that I really care about. And this is what I want it to look like. And then the great part is that this year at Heinz Field at our My Cause My Cleat game this Sunday, we're going to be inviting some of those organizations to take part in the game with us and to lead our Terrible Towel Twirl. So we're looking forward to it. So it's just another element for us to just support our players. But they get extremely excited when there's just another opportunity. And I think also that the NFL is also supporting and rallying around the causes that they care about. And so, one of the ones that's really great, Zach Banner, who's on our O-line, he has really started working with a group out here in Clareton and in Pittsburgh. And so it's called the Moms Group, but all of the women in this group have lost their children from gun violence. And so this is something that he started working with during off season and has continued to build a relationship with them, and really wanted to just uplift and recognize the group and the work that they're doing to support the women and the families who have lost their loved ones to gun violence. And so I think it's just a great opportunity for our players to just elevate these causes and just talk about why they care about them and support them. And so, you talked about off season. So, like you said, like during the football season, it's crazy. Off season is the time that we take to prepare for the work that we do during in season. And so just because our players aren't in the building during off season, it doesn't mean any of the community work stops. So we really just continue to do that, continue to do the work in the community, making sure, from food distributions, especially when it comes to Women's History Month, Black History Month, making sure that we're working collaboratively with our partners to recognize those months and to also just do good work in the community as well. So a lot of stuff happens during off season to just prep and prepare for the season ahead.
I think, I love the idea of My Cause, My Cleats, because you turn your TV on, it's just, oh, cool. These guys are customizing their cleats for something they're passionate about, but, it does serve a purpose. It opens doors and eyes to all these different organizations, like, the YMCAs and the Big Brothers, Big Sisters and the Boys and Girls Clubs, but I have never heard of that one you just mentioned. So even it opens the door to see all these great causes that are out there. And I think at the core, that might be the coolest part of the whole My Cleats, my cause, my cleats movement. The second thing you mentioned, going through your intro there, and a little bit about what you do, is you mentioned obviously COVID and it having an impact on, truly everybody in so many different ways. From a community relations standpoint, obviously it's kind of a heavy event driven department. So when you suddenly take the thing away of hosting in-person events, it's like, what are we going to be able to do, and how are we going to still be able to make that impact? So you don't have to dive too far in about all the things you did, but what are some examples that you did personally with your Steelers and within your community relations department within COVID, and how did you adjust and change what you were doing to still make sure you were making a positive impact?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one thing I always say, it's super important, this will be important for whether you're in high school or whether you're in college, is transferable skills, right? And so you always have to be football in the world we live in. I think especially last year, it's an ever-changing world. So we have to be creative and adjustable. So I was really happy. Pretty much all the events that we usually do, we were able to still do virtually last season. So one of the things that we did was a digital divide conversation. As we know, a lot of students were struggling, and some of them are continuing to struggle with learning online. And so we were able to provide a grant to a couple of our organizations here in Pittsburgh that were doing work around supporting students that were really struggling around the digital divide, from just different community hubs to technical assistance and laptops. But the way that we started that was working with our community partners and our players, having a conversation with youth groups around what are the problems and issues that they're seeing. So we could be really intentional with our dollars, and also working with our partners to make sure that the funds are specifically getting to communities and youth members who really need that support. So our players were able to sit down, have a conversation with them around, how's learning going at home? Like, are you getting all the tutoring and support needed during after school? What are some things that would be helpful? So we were really able to kick that off and spearhead that. And something else that we were able to do was we always do a breast cancer cooking class in person with McGee Women's Hospital here in Pittsburgh. And we were able to do a virtual cooking class with breast cancer patients and 2 of our players. So, things like that where it's usually in person. And while we love to, see people's faces, and be able to have that one-on-one interaction, we had to move all virtual. So I would say that those are my 2 favorite events that we were able to move to a virtual platform last year.
Very cool. Very cool. I think just like everybody else, you had to take that moment, change, adjust. It's part of the workforce. It's part of the things you have to go through in life. And I think everybody got a little bit of taste of that there here over the last 2 years. Hopefully we go back to hosting everything in events, but at the end of the day, the impact is still what it's going to be no matter what's going on. And that's truly what is the important part. Got a message here from Nathan. We have a ton of questions rolling in, which is super exciting. I hope we can get to them all, but I'm going to throw it out to our Gold Jacket Lounge here at the Hall of Fame, where Nathan Martin's sitting, looking through all those questions, and he's got some questions from some of our students who have tuned in so far. So Nathan, take it away.
Yeah, Jake, thank you so much. And Blayre, thank you for being a part of the program with us. And students, thank you for sending your questions. This has been a pleasure for me to read through all these and try to figure out which ones we can plug into the program. I'm going to start with a question from Michael, sophomore at Loyola Chicago. And he said, I'm a sophomore. Blayre, how did you get started, and maybe advice you would have for somebody who's only a sophomore trying to think about getting into the sports industry? How does Michael get started?
Yeah. So hi, Michael. One thing that I would suggest is, number one, I know you probably thought about it, but internships, also taking time to shadow people, even if you can't be there in person, reaching out to clubs and saying, hey, I just wanted to learn more about your job and your industry. There's a lot of people who've reached out to me, and I've taken the time to just kind of talk to them and give them advice about just kind of how to start building a career in the sports world if you'd like one. But one thing about me, as you see from my background, I was not in sports at all. A lot of work that I focused on early in my career was around social justice, equity work. And the way I got to the Steelers was just really by word of mouth, and continuing to just network and to get to know people who were in the community space. And so when this position came open, they just reached out to me and asked me to come and interview for it. So I would say, definitely right now, early in your career, while you're a sophomore, take the time to see if you can do internships, even at the Pro Football Hall of Fame and at different clubs. And then also just take the time to just reach out to people, because people remember people who just reach out and say, hey, I just want to learn a little bit more about the work that you're doing. So when a position possibly comes open, they might reach out to you and see if you'd be interested in the opportunity. But I would say too that, if sports is where you're meant to end up, just continue to follow your passion and what you're interested in doing. Because if you asked me 10 years ago, would I be here at the Pittsburgh Steelers? I would probably tell you no, but I love the work that I do just because I'm so community oriented, and my job still gives me the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And you mentioned networking within that answer. And we have a question from Nirvana, University of New Mexico. How important is networking to you getting your job with the Pittsburgh Steelers? Mm-hmm. And then the follow-up to that, are you still networking? How important is it to what you do in your career now with the Steelers?
Yeah. So hi, Nirvana. So yes, definitely networking is how I came to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was actually someone that I was working with when I was at Adagio Health. And they asked for recommendations for this position. And so he knew my work style. He knew also that I was really committed and dedicated to the work that I do. And so he's the one who recommended me for this position. So I was only able to get that through networking and to get to know him and just continuing to just grow that relationship. And then the second part of your question, how I network now is just I love my counterparts at the different teams. So really taking the opportunity to get to know them and the community work that they're doing. We share the great thing about the NFL is like we all share our best practices of just like how's your programming working out, just different opportunities for clubs to consider, because we all just want to do good work and also make sure our players and our community is supported. So I really take the time, during off season to just say like, hey, if I'm over in Philly, reaching out to my counterpart over in Philly and saying, hey, do you just want to grab a coffee, just so we can continue to just build that relationship. And the same is with the NFL as well, just taking the time to get to know them. And even, this summer when we were at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, to be able to just get to know people there. So I would say networking, it doesn't matter where you're at in your career, it's so key and it's so important. And so just continue to do that. But I continue to do networking in my career here at the Steelers.
Yeah, I think you're right when you talk about networking doesn't really stop. Jake and I always kind of laugh because this program before the snap has helped us expand our networks,
right?
Your personal networks across the league to so many different people. Megan from the University of Colorado says, you're a woman working in the sports industry. And you kind of got a smile. So you probably have had a question similar to this. What is that like? Are there challenges? Do you feel like you're, a trailblazer in some regard? Is it different on the business side? Can you kind of just speak to being a woman working in sports, what has typically been a male-dominated industry for a long time?
Yeah. So, I definitely think, first shout out to every woman who's in sports. It is, not going to lie, very intimidating as a woman to come in a male-dominated space. But, one thing I always feel myself that I'm very fortunate to have is, as I said earlier on in my career, was focused on a lot of women's rights work, right? So my voice and around just around women and equity, like we were the voice at the table, right? And so I think a lot of my work there helped prepare me for what I do right now. I will say it doesn't matter if you're in sports or whatever industry you might be in, a lot, those conversations, and especially when you're at the table and you have an idea, they can be extremely intimidating. But one thing I always tell people, and especially students, is that your voice is important. And I think especially for women who are in this field, to always know like their voice and their point of view and the way that they see the world is extremely important. One thing I always say is that, we're one of the largest team with a female fan base. So we better be inclusive of women being at the table, also making sure that we're being inclusive of women in the workplace. And so that's one thing that I love about our team is that we're welcoming of all voices. But I would say for especially women who are wanting to pursue a career in sports, that number one, you are welcome here. Your voice is needed here. So don't let that intimidate you. Just go in, own your power. And I would say to always reach out to other women who are in the sports world, because all of us have very similar stories. But I think the most important thing is that we're just here to support each other. But that would be my advice. But I think it's so important that number one, that we always serve as mentors to the next generation of female leaders who want to be in the sports world. And I think it's so great the way the NFL and just different clubs are continuing to highlight and make sure that women are included in the work that they do.
Yeah, I love that. Love the way you answered that. That was, in a lot of ways, that was pretty powerful. So thank you, Blayre. And I'm going to ask one more from our students and I'll send it back to Jake. I know we haven't gotten to all our student questions, so we'll have them throughout this entire program. And this is from Jihad, Florida A&M student, and says, the NFL, the Steelers, these teams, you guys are involved with a lot of initiatives, a lot of causes. Is there one, Blayre, that you see the NFL needing to maybe they're missing the mark? They need to start supporting this cause, or maybe the Steelers need to start supporting this cause, or you're like, okay, we're already supporting this, but this is an area we can grow, because you're constantly evaluating yourself in your own job and your own career with the Steelers.
Yeah. So I think, there's so many different causes, but I think something that, we as that we just continue to need to get better at, and just making sure that we're not pushing it to the side or missing the mark, is social justice. We need to constantly make sure that we are listening, being intentional, making sure that it's being incorporated to the programming that we're doing. And social justice is it's such a broad word, but the reality of the situation is that the NFL is majority Black male dominated, right? And so we need to make sure that we're listening to our players. How are we supporting them? How are we supporting the work that they're doing? And so I think the NFL has done a great job from, the Social Justice Fund, which is a matching fund between the organization and the players, of just continuing to just move that forward. And I think that's just something that we every day need to get better at. The next generation of athletes, I think, especially in college, it's great to see them just owning their voice, because as they start to come into the professional sport, they're going to already know, this is the work that I did in college that I want to continue as I go to pro sports. So I think that that's just something that, the NFL, all of us as clubs and teams just need to continue to prioritize in our work. And I know we do that here at the Steelers, and I know a lot of other teams do it as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's not necessarily an area that, like you said, they're missing the mark or we're just avoiding it. It's just we need to constantly be aware so that we can continue to self-evaluate, continue to grow, because players look to do that in their performance on the field, but you guys are also looking to do that with the ways that you're engaging the community off the field. Well, I'm going to send it to Jake. Jake, I know, has some more questions. Students, keep submitting your questions. We'll do our best to get as many involved in the program, but really appreciate all of your involvement to this point.
All right. Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, Blayre, and I want to kind of touch on, we kind of gave your description as a whole, what you do throughout the entire year, day to day, but really interesting, especially when you look in sports, because you have that game day. You have the day that, it's going to be a long day. We all know that. But there's, everybody kind of has their one thing that they do, but then they kind of help out other folks throughout the stadium and other areas as well. So let's just say typical Sunday, 1:00 kickoff. What does the director of community relations do on game day for the Steelers?
Yeah, so we do a lot. So we have since the start of the season, we've honored a frontline worker every home game. So that, number one, making sure that that person is at the stadium, so they get there 2 hours before kickoff, making sure that they have everything that they need, and then escorting them to the field where we shoot their pregame segment that runs in game. And then we also honor a veteran every home game, and it's at the beginning of the third quarter. So we help, make sure that person is also there on game day as well, making sure they're escorted down so we can shoot their segment, as I mentioned, the beginning of the third quarter, and making sure that they're having a fun and comfortable experience. So I always love during game day, because we really are able to highlight a lot of important stories in our community. Also, a lot of people who have done amazing work, and just really giving them a day to just enjoy the Steelers game. And it just have fun. And also it's great because they bring their family and their friends with them. And so sometimes it's been a tearjerker for us, just because people are so overwhelmed with emotions. And they've been a Steelers fan forever, but they never thought that, in a million years that they'd be, down at Heinz Field being honored during one of our games. So it's been always a fun time during game day. But it's definitely cold, especially in Pittsburgh. So we're bundled up and always ready to go.
Awesome. Yeah. It's just the power of sports, right?
Yep.
It's something super simple. It's 10, 15 seconds on a Jumbotron with a voiceover PA read, but that 15, 20 seconds that's something you'll never forget as no matter who you are. So very, very cool. Along the same lines, working in sports, you do get to be a part of great moments like that. But then, there's those moments when you kind of lay your head down at night, or when you're going to be retired at the end of your career, like, looking back, it's like, I can't believe I was a part of that moment. Have you had that moment in your career with the Steelers? And what would that moment be to where you kind of have to take a step back and go, wow, I was really there, or I got to be a part of this game, this play. What would that moment be for you?
Yeah. So, I think, I hate to sound like a cliche, but I feel like it's almost sometimes every day here at the Steelers. I mean, like any job, you have your high and your low moments, but I think, for me, is really being able to see when our guys really are turned, like I could really see their passion in the work that they do, which happens so many different times. It happens at community events. It can happen, here at the office when they come in my office and they're just like, hey, Blayre, I didn't know this was going on. So I think, really for me, what I see is when our players, are just continue to just show their passion off of the field. And I think just really being able to take something that they love and really see it to fruition. And one thing I always give the example, Vance McDonald, when he was with us, he had a really close relationship with an organization called Convoy of Hope. And he said, I've been trying to get this event off the ground, since I've been here, and it was my first season. And so he was like, it's an event with like 500 people. And I was like, it's my first season, but I'm like, sure, like if you're game, I'm game. And so we were able to have an event. It's called Huddle for the Holidays. We're actually having it this year. It's going to be our third annual event that we've had. And so it was amazing to see it all come together. We served over 500 families with just resources that they needed during the holidays. And I think for us to be able to pull that off, I think for especially my first season was just an amazing accomplishment. But at the same time, at the end of the day, what's important to me is just to make sure that our players' voices are heard and valued. And I think that that's just an amazing example of that. So I think, when I lay my head down, when I'm retired, I think that that'll just be something that I continue to look back on and just extremely proud that we're continuing to do it every year.
Working in community relations or any part of working with the community, you get to be a part of special events like that. And not to try to put you on the spot, but, looking through your career with the Steelers, I'm sure there's events with players or members of the community that you've been a part of. Has there been one that's been the most meaningful for you that, like, we talk about that tearjerker moment? Yeah. Is there ones that you've been a part of that are like, wow, we are making a huge impact and this is something I'm never going to forget, even after I'm long gone from the Steelers, working, whatever it might be?
Yeah. Something that I have to say was really important. So last year, number one, it was seeing our players register to vote for the first time. So I think that was something that will always be, definitely that will stand out to me always. But then it was also just getting our kids who were in youth football, they were eligible to vote. And so getting them registered to vote as well. And so it was a food drive and a voter registration drive too. And so I think that that's something for me that I think will always stand out. And definitely like a tearjerker at the time, just because it was just so powerful for them to just come and be like, here, can we make sure that we get this out today? So I think that that's something that will definitely stand out.
Very cool. Very cool. I mentioned at the beginning, part of our mission here is to honor the heroes of the game. So all those players who have had an impact on the game of football, not just our Hall of Famers, but anybody who had a minute in the NFL has truly changed the game to make it what it is today. But that second part is to preserve its history. And something our goal is to, not only showcase all the great careers in and around the NFL, but we have a really cool museum here as well that showcases the history of the game of football. So every program, we try our best to incorporate our museum as much as we can. So Nathan is up out of his seat. He's out in the museum doing a live shot for us. So I'm going to throw it to Nathan, who's in our Super Bowl gallery in front of some probably a familiar Steelers artifact to you. So Nathan, take it away.
Yeah, Jake, thank you so much. And like he was telling you guys, I'm in the Lamar Hunt Super Bowl gallery, and it's in this gallery that we have artifacts and jerseys and footballs and cleats and everything from the biggest game of the year. And as you guys can see behind me, I'm standing in front of a portion of this gallery that's dedicated to the Super Bowl champions from the 2000s. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers won 2 Super Bowls in the 2000s. They won Super Bowl 40 and Super Bowl 43. In Super Bowl 40, they defeated the Seattle Seahawks, and team legend Hines Ward was named Super Bowl MVP. It was only 3 years later, they defeated the Arizona Cardinals with that amazing toe tap, corner of the end zone, touchdown grab by team legend San Antonio Holmes. Right there's the pylon that he was making that catch right over, and you can kind of see the photo we have there in the display case as well. Now, Blayre, we understand that you weren't with the team during those Super Bowl championships, and actually it's kind of cool. A student, Sean, from the University of Indianapolis, asked the same question I was going to ask from here, so I want to give him some credit too. You weren't with those Super Bowl championship teams. You definitely weren't with the steel curtain in the 1970s when they were winning Super Bowls. But how do you, working in community relations, utilize the team legends, players like Hines Ward or Santonio Holmes or anybody from the steel curtain? And then how do you utilize the current players as well within your role?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, the greatest part about Pittsburgh is that we have a lot of alum who not only, when they play in Pittsburgh, they stay here, right? So I think that's, one of the things that I love the most is that we see our alum all of the time. So, Charlie Batch, so many different other alum, Franco, like we see them all of the time. They're not only at games, but they also participate in our players' community events. So, Coach Tomlin and Cam Hayward, they always have the annual Thanksgiving distribution. And so Charlie has always been at those Thanksgiving distributions. So I think number one, the best part is that they make my job easy because they're always around and they want to know like, hey, Blayre, what are our players doing this week in the community? Hey, I'm gonna pop up. And then also, as I mentioned, they stay here in Pittsburgh, but they have started to develop community centers here in Pittsburgh. So when our players are out in the community, I always make sure that, hey, we go over to the Best of the Batch Foundation. Joey Porter just put up his center, the Jasmine Nyree Center in the West End. So just taking the time to make sure that our players know of the great work that our alumni are doing. And making sure that we stop by and support them and vice versa. And I think it's so important that, our current players know how amazing and how important our alumni are, not only for the work that they did on the field, but off the field, they serve as a great example of saying like, hey, I'm a Hall of Famer, but I'm also here building a center in Pittsburgh. And for some of the guys like Charlie Batch, he's born and raised in Pittsburgh. So his center means a lot to him. So we really take the time to utilize our alumni. They were extremely helpful during last year, during COVID, when we weren't able to have our players out in the community to just step up and participate in food distributions. So alumni are so important to the game. And we just continue to value them every single day.
I love that you mentioned, obviously, Hall of Famer Franco Harris, because he comes up here and does a lot of stuff with us as well in Canton. But I also love that you mentioned Charlie Batch, because we have a unique and special relationship with him here at the Hall of Fame, where he brings a group of his students from the Best of the Batch Foundation up for a very special field trip that we do in the month of May called our Get Fit Training Camp presented by Panini. So we've met Charlie and we love having him and his kids up here. It's just another way he's giving back to the community. He's giving those kids an experience coming to Canton in the Hall of Fame that otherwise they maybe wouldn't have. So that's awesome that you guys work with him, obviously. And it's really cool to hear how you get the current players and the legends kind of to be working together. That's all for me out in the museum. I'm going to send it back to Jake, and then I'm going to go get some more student questions before we wrap up. So Jake, back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nathan. And yeah, you talk about, those community events, those community centers. So the one unique thing I think about working in community relations is that you get to have that experience out in the community and see the power of football. Here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, we're unapologetically football. We know that there's all these different things out there that can teach you important life lessons, but and we are the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You are the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we have to talk about the game of football. In your time with the Steelers there, what have you seen that the game of football can teach those who play it, coach it, are fans of it, who may be tuning in to listen to us today? What is the one or two things that you think the game of football can teach that you can apply to your everyday life?
Yeah, I think, I think one thing I always say, it's so important in the work that we do. Everyone has a role to play, right? And I think the game of football is a perfect example of that, right? You need to know your position, study your position, understand your assignment every day, right? I can't be an expert in everything, but I need to make sure that I have partners and people around me who can give me the advice, who make me better. And so I think that, when we talk about, what can people take away from the game of football and the work that we do every day, is just making sure that you have a good team around you, playing your part, playing your role, and then also understanding the importance of teamwork that we do every single day. The way Sundays happen every single day is by amazing teamwork. Not only from, our equipment team, but, the nutritionists, like all of it. There's so many different aspects that go into the game of football. And so I would say, one thing that I would definitely always tell people to take away is from the game of football and just adapt to your own work is that everybody has an important role to play in the game of football, in the work that you do, whether you're at a business or an office. And so for everyone to understand their role and how to build in their own role and their own power and bring your best foot forward to the work that you do. So, and I think that's the only way that you get better as a team.
I think those are all, because if you just take away the program and just put that conversation, that clip out there, you could be talking about football, you could be talking about baseball, basketball, you could be talking about, the normal work-life balance, the, office work, you name it, that can be applied. And that's the cool thing about the game of football. Along those same lines, working in community relations and seeing the power of football, you get to experience so many different cool things, as we have mentioned, whether it be on game day or different community events. So I believe, and this is just my personal opinion, that working in community relations, you truly have to love what you do. You look at across the league, and I'm sure you see this, the people who work in community relations tend to stay in community relations a very long time. And it's because, we see ourselves as kind of within that same role, working in youth and education. We truly love what we do, and we love leaving that impact on the community. So you really have to know your why. So looking at your career, why do you love being the director of community relations for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah. So I think for me, it's really just having the opportunity to give back to the community. So when I was in college, something that I did right out of college was I did 1 year of AmeriCorps. And so I knew that community was always going to be my passion. And I think it's just having the opportunity to help uplift and elevate a lot of organizations who don't get a lot of attention. And to be able to introduce our players to them and for them to kind of talk about just like common goals and common themes that they might have seen in their life. And it always is so important and amazing to me when, like one of our guys goes out and is able to, talk with, a kid who's in youth football and really see themselves in them. Right. And I think that's so important in the work that we do. And for me, every day, like that's a check off my list, because I always want to make sure that our next generation know that, and especially here in Pittsburgh, that they know that they're supported, and that our guys, when we just say like we care about the community, no, we genuinely care about the community. And I always say, Coach Tomlin says it best always. He's like, if we win a Super Bowl, that's not enough for the city of Pittsburgh. We need to make sure that we're constantly giving back, that we're constantly being aware of what's happening in our city and how we can support them. And so for me, that's always going to be what my why is, to just make sure that our community is supported, that our youth supported, and our next generation has a positive example for the footsteps that lay before them.
All right, I'm going to throw it back out to Nathan. I know he's got some other questions that we've had come in here in the last couple minutes, plus some ones we had earlier in the program. So I'm going to throw it back to him, and he's going to ask some more of our student questions.
Yeah, so we got a question here. What's a time that you failed, Blayre, or made a mistake, and then working with the Steelers, how did you learn from that and kind of improve upon yourself in that situation?
Yeah, so I would probably say, it was definitely like my first season. And I think it was during a community event. And I think just, there was more people that showed up than what we had, basically. So it was a community drive event, and there was a lot of people that showed up. And I underestimated the number of people that would be there. And so I think it's more of a time that, I wouldn't say had to learn from my mistake, but then also quickly adjust, right? Football is all about how do you adjust on the fly, right? And so it was a food distribution that we were having. There were more cars there than supplies. And so I had to quickly adjust ahead of time. And I always say, like, listen to your inner voice, because something told me in my mind, okay, let me count the amount of cars that are in line right now, based upon how many boxes I know. So I had one of the interns go and do that. And so quickly knowing that we didn't have enough, I called and I reached out to our community partners in our grocery store, and I said, hey, I'm in a bind. I can't like tell these cars to go home. So what can I do? So what I was able to do is that they weren't able to get, it was a Thanksgiving distribution, so they weren't able to get a turkey. We had more than enough boxes for sides, but we were able to give them gift cards for them to go buy their own turkey, right? And so I think that was a time, like, number one, having to learn from your own mistake ahead of time, but then on top of that, how do you adjust on the fly? And so that's, something that I would say, mistakes happen in the work that you do. We're all human, but I think it's so important. How do you adjust to make sure that you're able to meet your end goal? And then how do you prepare for next year to say, okay, how do we get better? So I think, that's an example that, I'm sure a lot of people who are in community relations have a lot of stories about, things that have happened, they've had to adjust, or just mistakes that they've made. But I always say, how do you just learn from it and move on?
Yeah, I think that's a great story of kind of, like you said, having to react in the moment and figure out a solution in that moment. And then, you get through that day and you're like, okay, how can I better prepare for next year so that we don't run into the same issue? Awesome story right there. This is from Carter, attends Butler University. And, Carter heard us talking about you working with the legends and the current players, and he wanted to know, is it different, or what's it like, I guess, the onboarding process when the rookies show up? Do you get to meet with the rookies, figure out what they're passionate about? And then he specifically wanted to know, what was Najee, Harris like when he came in this year, working with this year's rookie class?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I would say, so it was great. Number one, the day after Najee came on board, it was a community draft day event. And so the second day when we flew him into Pittsburgh, it was great because Najee was able to stop by that event at Heinz Field. So we got him right out in the community as soon as he landed in Pittsburgh. And Najee's been great to work with, and is extremely intentional about supporting his community back home, and really also supporting a lot of charities and organizations here in Pittsburgh. But in terms of the interaction with the rookies, so one thing I will say, community relations and player engagement in the NFL, they work together really closely. And so when rookies come in during our rookie class, I do an introduction with them of the community relations department, how we're able to support them. And so during the weeks that they're here, we have community events planned for them. So some of them, as I mentioned, are at different alumni, their charities and organizations. We've always gone to the Mel Blount Youth Home for them to go out and visit him and see the work that he's doing, as well as the Best of the Batch Foundation. So really just taking the time to orient them to Pittsburgh, the rich history that we have, for them to get familiar with some of the alum, and for them to just give them some thoughts and advice, but really just taking the time to introduce them to the city of Pittsburgh. And that's not only just from a community standpoint, but then just kind of where's the best place to go in Pittsburgh to eat? So really just taking the time to introduce them so this place can feel like home for them.
So where is the best place in Pittsburgh to go to eat in case we're ever down there, us or the students?
So I would say you definitely go to the north side. So there's a couple of places there, but it really depends on what you're interested in. The best Thai place to go is Pacidi's Garden, which is in Lawrenceville, but there's definitely a lot of good places in Pittsburgh, but it all depends on your food preference. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Appreciate that advice for the next time I'm down there in Pittsburgh. So this question here comes from, make sure I get the right student here. Brian, who attends the University of Illinois. And he said, you majored in communication. You're working in community relations. So there might be a tie-in, but how did what you learned in your coursework in college in communication, which could go all over the place when it comes time to get a job, how are you using that degree today working in community relations?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think what you have to understand, communications goes through everything that you do. It doesn't matter if you're in IT, it doesn't matter if you're in sports, nonprofit, communications goes everywhere. So I think for me, the way that I look at my work, which is in two different elements, not only from a community standpoint, but how do we communicate the work that we're doing to our fan base, to our community as a whole. So, certain things from building an email marketing campaign to like, how do you really narrow down your audience, are all skills that I learned in college that I utilize today in my role. And so that's why sometimes I'm really able to work really closely and help even like my content, my communications team, because when I come with a plan of like, hey, here's, for example, like my cause, my cleats, here's all of the players' charities. How are we communicating this to the organizations that will be recognized? Then also, how are we narrowing it down to organizations and audiences here in Pittsburgh that really want to get further involved in our players' organizations? So I think just the way that you communicate your work with other colleagues, and I think just also the way that the work that I do now, my communications degree continues to pop up, and I think the work that I did in college too. But I think just also just the professional background that I have is really what helped prepare me for the work that I do today. So that's why I always say, look at a variety of different fields, because you just never know where you're going to end up and how you'll just land a position too. So just never be scared to just, look at a job that you think you might not be interested in, but you just want to learn more about it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice that you gave there at the end about kind of in some ways casting that wide net, and you're going to figure out either what you like or what you don't like, and both of those things are okay. Yeah. It's going to help you figure out where you need to be. So great advice there at the end, and it's a great application for how you see your communication degree in your day-to-day work. I know that we didn't get to all of our student questions, and that's because the students did a great job asking questions. So now the next challenge for our students is we have the LinkedIn link to Blayre's LinkedIn page. Click on it, connect with her, say, hey, I saw you on Before the Snap. They didn't get to ask my question, and ask your question to her in a message on LinkedIn. I'm sure she'd be more than happy to take a couple of minutes, hopefully only a couple of minutes, but we'll see how many students connect with you to answer your guys' questions. No, seriously, you'll find out, guys, that working or hoping to work in the sport industry, if you'll take a couple of minutes each day to try to connect with people that have interesting careers that you may have an interest in, as long as you're being genuine and you're not just saying like, hey, can you hire me? Hey, what jobs do you have? If you're asking authentic and true questions that show that you just want to improve as an individual and set yourself up to one day maybe get a job, more often than not, people in the sport industry will take a couple of minutes to send you a quick response and answer your question, or maybe even get on a quick Zoom call with you and answer your questions that way. So I know Blayre would do that. So connect with her, send your questions to her. But we're not done with all our questions for you, Blayre. I know Jake's going to wrap things up with another question or two, but thank you so much for being a part of the program here on Before the Snap.
Thank you, Nathan.
Yes, as Nathan said, just a couple to wrap up. And I want to kind of go back to one thing. One of your answers, you talked about Mike Tomlin and his thoughts on, the Super Bowl, winning, great, but that's not why we're here. We're here to make an impact. How important is that relationship from the business side and the football side to all be on the same page? You hear stories all the time. New head coach comes in, changes the atmosphere on the football side, but then, there may not be that relationship to the business side, or he's like, hey, I'm over this all. We're going to make sure we're all streamlining along the same line, which it sounds like Coach Tomlin is like that. How important is it to have that within not only the Steelers, but even in any business, these two different, but the same kind of organizations under the same umbrella, all working together for the same goal?
Yeah, no, I think, it's extremely important. I think in this, business, we talked about, building relationships and networking. Getting to know your coaches is extremely important, right? Because I think one of the best things is that coach understands and also values our community. He values the community relations department. And so, even things from just like taking some time before a team meeting, just for me to talk to the team about, what's going on in the community is so valuable. So I think it's so important building those relationships, just also letting our coaches know like the work that our players are doing in the community, and supporting even our coaches when it comes to their own community efforts. So I would say it's really invaluable, and it's so important. And that communication, I can't stress that enough, is important as well, because even if it's, as I always say, like quick bullet points, right? It needs to be quick and seamless and to the point. And so really taking the time to provide them with information of the great work that they're doing, just being able to report out. So our coaches are aware of that as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's so cool to hear that not only the players want to be involved, but the coaches want to leave an impact too. Some of them coached in the area with the team for 20 plus years and our mainstays in the community. So it's very cool to see that they're leaving the same, if not more of an impact as well. And then everybody coming together to work for that common goal. We're going to wrap things up here. Last question, Blayre, for you today. And again, I'll echo what Nathan said. Thank you so much for being a part of the program today. We know the NFL season is busy, and we know that every hour is probably already accounted for. So we thank you for taking time out of your busy day, your busy week to be a part of the program today. But the last question is one that we end every program with, because I think it's a cool way to kind of send everybody who's watching off with that one nugget of information. So many cool things we talked about today, from what you do to networking advice to trying to find that one job you want. If there was one piece of information, it can be something we talked about already or something new that you want to throw out there. What is that one piece of information you want everybody who tuned in today, all of these great students, to kind of walk away and apply to their lives?
Yeah, I would say, follow your passion. That's honestly how I got to where I am today. I followed my gut and things that I was passionate about. And I continue to just voice my thoughts and my opinion. And I think that that's so important. Never be scared of your own voice. Never think that your voice or your opinion isn't important, because normally when you're thinking of something, the person next to you is also thinking the same thing. And so I would just say, continue to follow your passion, what you love to do. Never be scared of challenges. Also, never be scared to make a mistake, because everyone has done it. The most successful person has done it. The most important thing is how you learn from those mistakes. So just know that. And also know that, we here at the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame, I'm sure as well, we're here to support you, because I think the most important thing is that we need to make sure that, whoever is the next community relations director for the Steelers, that they are just as successful as I am. So just know that you have a whole industry that's here to support you. And we look forward to you getting into the industry and giving you the advice that made us to where we are today too.
Awesome. And with that, we're going to wrap up this installment of the Pro Football Hall of Fame's Before the Snap series. As we said at the beginning and just a few minutes ago, Blayre, thank you so much for being a part of the program and kind of throwing out that wisdom to all of our students who we had tuned in today. And before we all leave, as we always do, make sure you hit that subscribe, hit that like button right here on this video today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to see all the great content we're coming out with, not only our Before the Snap series, but our Heart of a Hall of Famer program connected by Extreme Networks, where we interview some Hall of Famers, and then our Mission podcast that's hosted by our great coworker, friend of ours here at the Hall of Fame, Jameer Howerton, who's interviewing all these great people in and around the game as well. For all of the viewers who tuned in today, all of our students, if you want to be the first to know about when we roll these next Before the Snap programs out, shoot us an email, education@profootballhof.com. And when we email everybody out, you'll be the first to know who's coming up that next month. So reach out to us. Again, email us at education@profootballhof.com. And truly, thank you for all of your great questions that you had. They're one of the most interactive programs and question-heavy programs we've had from our students so far this year. Next week, we got our last program of 2021. Hard to believe we've already reached there, but we're going to wrap up this year with Arthur Hightower, who works in player development all the way out on the West Coast with the Los Angeles Chargers. So we're going to learn a little bit about his career next week here on Before the Snap. And as I said at the beginning, football, it's an everyday job, every day, pretty much every day of the year. And it truly makes an impact on everybody who's involved in it. So Blayre, again, thank you so much for everything you do for the game of football and everything you do for us here at the Hall of Fame. Eternally grateful for you being a part of the program today. And to all of our viewers, thank you so much for viewing and tuning in today. Couldn't have done it without you as well. So we will see everybody here next week on our Pro Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel for our Before This